Imagine for a moment that the kings of the Dark Ages, Charlemagne, Alfred the Great, Basil II, and others suddenly found themselves standing in our world. Roughly 1,000 years separate their reigns from ours. In that span, the world has grown unrecognizably vast, powerful, and complex. Empires have crumbled, nations have multiplied, and continents once unknown now hold billions. To us, the conveniences of modern life, electricity, the internet, medicine, airplanes, are simple facts of existence. To them, they would be miracles, or perhaps sorcery. Today, let's explore what would happen if the rulers of the medieval world opened their eyes in ours. What would amaze them? What would horrify them? And what might, despite the centuries between us, still feel familiar? Our royal guests arrive in modern-day New York. At first, they might think they've awakened in heaven or hell. The glow of neon, the hum of airplanes, the influencers filming them, all of it would be a kind of overwhelming storm of light and motion. They'd probably cover their ears. The clatter of car horns, the roar of subways. It would sound like the machinery of war. And the first problem would appear immediately. Language. Alfred the Great spoke Old English, a tongue far closer to German than anything we call English today. Even scholars have to study for years to read it fluently. To Alfred, our speech would be as alien as birdsong. Charlemagne, on the other hand, spoke Frankish and Latin, though he struggled to write. Louis IX, a pious Frenchman, would at least recognize the rhythm of modern French, but not the words. Only through translators and scholars could they communicate. And even then, it would take time. Once they did, they'd begin to ask the first of many questions. Where are my armies? Who rules this empire? And what are those glowing chariots moving faster than horses could ever dream? The age of machines. The medieval world was powered by muscle, water, and wind. The modern world by invisible forces and fossil fuels. Electricity, combustion, nuclear power. To the kings of the Dark Ages, this would border on divine intervention. A switch that brings light, a metal square with tiny men trapped inside, a carriage that drives itself without a horse. It's not an exaggeration to say that a smartphone would appear to them as a holy relic. To hear voices, to see faces from across the world in an instant. This was a feat that even prophets and saints never claimed to perform. The concept of the internet, invisible webs of thought connecting billions, would defy all logic. Charlemagne might call it the word made metal. Even our architecture would seem supernatural. Glass towers scraping the clouds, electric lanterns brighter than day, water that flows at the turn of a handle. It's no wonder they'd cross themselves and ask which god we serve now. What would they think of us? Once the initial shock passed, they would look around and they'd notice us. The first thing to strike them? Our health, or perhaps people with pink and blue hair. For much of the medieval world, daily survival was uncertain. Disease, hunger, and injury lurked everywhere. To see so many people well-fed, clean, and living into old age would seem almost utopian. Still, not everything would impress them. Our sedentary lives, sitting in cars, staring at screens, would seem lazy, even shameful. Medieval kings, for all their wealth, were used to motion. They hunted, rode horses, led armies. They measured worth in action, not comfort. And then, of course, there's appearance. Many of them would be startled at the lack of hierarchy in how we dress. In their world, clothing announced your place in society. A peasant and a king could never be mistaken. But in ours, jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, to them, we'd look like a nation of equals. Perhaps disturbingly so. I think that these guys would love themselves some Gucci t-shirts though. Food, drink, and everyday life. Now imagine trying to feed them. If you offered Richard the Lionheart a banana, he wouldn't recognize it. Tomatoes, corn, potatoes, chocolate, all products of the New World were unknown to medieval Europe. What they did eat was simpler: bread, cheese, fish, grains, the occasional meat, and a lot of ale. Water wasn't always safe, so even children drank weak beer. Fast food would fascinate them. The idea that one could ride up to a window, speak into a metal box, and moments later be handed hot food would seem like pure sorcery. And coffee, the fuel of our civilization, might alarm them. A black potion that keeps men awake for hours, they'd say? Surely the work of alchemists. And in my opinion, a can of Red Bull might actually kill them on the spot. Still, one thing might bring comfort: the idea of feasting together. That at least would be familiar, though strange keto or vegan options with plastic forks might not. Society and class. Here's a thought that would truly bend their minds: our lack of hierarchy. For a medieval king, society was divinely ordered. God above, then kings, nobles, knights, peasants. Each had a role, each a duty. To see a world where a farmer's son could become a president, or where a woman could rule a nation, or where the people themselves vote for their leaders, this would upend their entire worldview. Some might find it exhilarating, others appalling. Charlemagne might see democracy as anarchy, a world where the mob rules instead of divine order. But Alfred, the philosopher king, might have admired the idea of law written for all, not just decreed by one. Still, they would all ask the same question: if everyone rules, who obeys? Faith and morality. This would be the deepest shock of all. Medieval life was saturated with faith. Every birth, death, illness, and storm was seen as an act of God. The church was not a Sunday pastime. It was the center of existence. To find the modern world so secular, where churches are empty, where people speak of God with hesitation or irony, would be heartbreaking to them. Louis IX, canonized as a saint, might see our age as one of moral decay. Charlemagne might see our science as arrogance, man playing at creation, and yet they might admire our compassion, our hospitals, our charities, our concern for the poor. These are Christian virtues carried forward, even if the faith that inspired them has dimmed. They would recognize the good, but they'd mourn the lost reverence, the nature of war. No medieval king was a stranger to war. It was the rhythm of their world: conquest, crusade, defense. But the sight of modern warfare would leave them speechless. Tanks, planes, nuclear weapons, automatic weapons, destruction on a scale they could never imagine. The idea that a single bomb could erase a city would seem to them not like warfare, but apocalypse. And yet, they might also envy our peace. Europe today is more stable than at any time in its recorded history. Charlemagne's empire bled for centuries, ours mostly does not. They would see our weapons as godlike, but perhaps our restraint as saintly. The mystery of knowledge. If there's one thing that would utterly awe them, it's how much we know. For most of human history, knowledge was locked away in monasteries, handwritten by monks. To read, let alone to own a book, was a privilege reserved mostly for those part of the highest levels of society. Today, a child with a phone has access to more information than all medieval libraries combined. To Charlemagne, who dreamed of reviving education across Europe, this would be the greatest miracle of all: that the minds of commoners could hold the wisdom once reserved for kings. And yet, he might wonder what we do with it. We have infinite knowledge, but often no purpose, endless communication, yet growing loneliness. The simple fact that the majority of people today have this privilege but choose to do absolutely nothing with it would baffle him. We have conquered ignorance, but not ourselves, the human condition. After the initial wonder and fear subsided, perhaps they would begin to see us not as gods, but as familiar. For all our technology and comfort, the same desires drive us: wealth, love, pride, power, faith, fear. Our cities are larger, but our ambition and our flaws are unchanged. They would recognize the corruption, the wars, the inequalities, the distractions. They might call it the same disease that felled empires long before us. And they would likely remind us that civilization is always a fragile thing, built not by machines but by virtue. If those kings of old stood among us long enough, they might change. They would see our medicines, our peace, our education, and perhaps accept that not all progress is pride. They would see our loneliness, our decadence, our moral drift, and warn that not all freedom is good. Perhaps they would smile at a classroom full of children learning freely. Perhaps Alfred would admire a world where knowledge is not chained to the throne. Perhaps Richard the Lionheart, staring at the launch of a rocket, would see in it the same light that drove men to explore, to conquer, to reach beyond the known. In the end, they might tell us what we forget, that civilization is not only measured by the towers we build, the cars we drive, the clothes we wear, but by the hearts that build them. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, check out my deep dive into how ancient Romans would react to this same scenario, right here. History is not just a record of what came before us, it's a mirror that shows who we've become. Until next time, take care and never stop learning.